Hello, everybody. Welcome to our study of Genesis. We're going to be in Genesis chapters 36 and 37 tonight. We're really not going to spend a lot of time in 36 because it makes a number of points, but it's really meant for the historians and theologians and folks like that. And 37 is so important, one of the most important chapters in Genesis, and we'll talk a lot about setting the stage and foundations. So if it's okay, we're going to go ahead and say goodbye to Esau by reading this one portion in 36. I am not going to go through all the names.
Oh, thank God.
Well, the reason why, again, like I said, that's really for the historians and theologians. I'll make my point about it, and then we'll get into 37. So chapter 36, verse 1, this is the account of Esau, all right, that is Edom. Esau took his wives from the women of Canaan. Remember, that's what got him in lots of trouble with his mother, and why his mother was really favoring Jacob. Okay, because his mother did not want, neither did his father want their sons marrying the Canaanite women. All right, they wanted to marry women from their own family. That's the reason why Jacob gets sent off to Padan Aram. He winds up, eventually marrying Leah, although it wasn't his intention to. He marries Rachel, okay, which is the one he loved, and that's going to come back to here in a few minutes as well. So this is Esau, and we're finishing off Esau. Although we really learned to like Esau, didn't we?
Yeah, he wasn't too bad.
He could have slaughtered his brother. He should have slaughtered his brother. He had every right to slaughter his brother. He chooses not only to forgive him, but to honor him. So let me get this straight. Is the lesson for me to learn is that when my brother does something bad to me, I'm supposed to forgive him?
Yes.
Yeah, what a thought. What a thought. Okay? Because, boy, we're going to see that again in Joseph. So, again, here it is, the book of Genesis. And if you really, really want to study Jesus Christ a whole lot, you're going to have to get ready for forgiveness. You're going to have to appreciate that because that's going to be a common theme with our Lord. Esau took his wives from the women of Canaan, Adad, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and then look at that name. Oh, good. Daughter of Anan, the Gritan. Look at all these folks. So he works, so right here, the writer of Genesis works through all of these for primarily one specific reason. We've talked about this before. When people like to say that the Bible or the book of Genesis is just myths or fables or fairy tales, it's not written like one. It's written as an historical document. This is a genealogy. These things get put into books throughout all of history. This is meant to prove that Esau is who he is and that God's promise to him is true as well. And that's what all these names mean. All right? But this is the account. Now we're down to verse 9. This is the account of Esau, the father of the Edomites in the hill country of Seir. So he does become a father of nation. Works his way straight on through down here. They talk about chieftains. They actually talk about kings. There's a lot of people. Obviously, they work their way through. Then they finish this thing off down to 29. These were the Horite chiefs, Latan, Shabal, Sibian, Anad, Dishan, Izar, and Dishan. These were the Horite chiefs, according to the divisions, in the land of Seir. Verse 31. These were the kings who reigned in Edom before any Israelite king reigned. That's a prophecy. There are no Israelite kings. There's no Israel. No. There's a guy running around named Israel, right? But this is before there were any Israelite kings. So that tells us that there would be Israelite kings. That would come way later on. So they run through all of those. And then gets down to verse 40. These were the chiefs descended from Esau by name, according to their clans and regions. And then finally, this was Esau, the father of the Edomites. So that's it. We understand that God promised to Esau is fulfilled. Esau is the father of a really important nation. There are kings that will come from him, etc., etc. Questions or comments? Yeah, it's not a very fascinating chapter. Yeah. But again, God's showing us again as an historian. My bachelor's degree is in history. As an historian, this tells me over and over again that this is not a fable. This is history. God's taking it very seriously. All right. Now, before we get into chapter 37, I've already said it's one of the most important chapters in Genesis. Actually, it's one of the most important chapters in the Old Testament. Why do you think I say that?
Because Joseph is his brothers don't want him. They almost killed him. He landed in jail.
Yeah, oh yeah. But why is this so important? Why is his story so important for the whole Bible?
Well, he's pretty important.
He is a very important person.
And did a lot of good things.
Right. Well, the biggest hint I'm going to give you, it's Colleen. The biggest hint I'm going to give you is that after the book of Genesis comes the book of Exodus. What happens in Exodus?
Exodus was bad.
Well, it all depends on how you want to look at it.
All it goes to is hi, Mom.
Hi, hon, how you doing?
All it goes to is welcome to O'Brien apartment, no matter who's apartment you press.
Right.
Oh, busy.
Oh, having trouble again?
Come in.
Oh, God.
All right. Why is this chapter in Genesis so important? And the hint is the next book after Genesis is Exodus. What's Exodus about?
Joseph.
Nope.
No, I read it just a long time ago.
Yes, they exit. Who's they?
That's right.
Who's they?
Israelite.
The Israelites, right? The children, the Hebrew children, okay? This is the story of Moses.
That's right.
All right. Well, before Moses can take the children of Israel out of Egypt, they have to go to Egypt. Len, you made it. Everybody was telling me you're going to make it. Yay. Right. Well, everybody knew you were going to make it.
Yeah, since probably a
I
little.
had to do a breathing treatment before I came downstairs, or I wouldn't be breathing.
Yeah, breathing is good too.
Yeah, especially
sure
after you break a rib.
Yeah. Did you get diagnosed with a broken rib?
Yeah.
Oh, honey, yeah. Then
So what did they do anything?
They don't do
nothing.
nothing.
no, there's not a whole lot you can
Don't
do.
even wrap it anymore.
Yeah, somebody
Nope,
said
nope.
this. I said, I don't think.
You suffer.
Yeah, you suffer.
Yeah, I broke one not too long ago because I fight. So I was in the ring and with a really good fighter, and he caught me. Yeah, he caught me right here, and that sucker stuck with me for months. Even when I thought it was gone.
The 10th rib.
Yep. Even when I was gone, all of a sudden out of nowhere, I'd be hurting. And it floated. It was the floating rib, so it goes in the front and the back. One day it would be all kinds of different things. Where you're walking in right now is a very exciting time. We're going to do Genesis chapter 37, and we have just realized why it's so important. Chapter 37 is so important. It's because of the next book, Exodus. And Exodus, as we studied a long time ago, is the story of Moses taking the Hebrew slaves out of Egypt. Well, before you can be taken out of a place, you had to go there first. This is the story of how Israel, the children of Israel, wind up in Egypt. And what's really interesting too, there's so many different interesting things. I know. I hear somebody moaning.
It's my phone.
Okay.
I can't shut it off. I can't shut it off because my son has seizures. My son that I live with has epilepsy,
Yep.
so I can't shut it off.
That's fine.
But both of my daughters have called me in the last 5 minutes, and
Right.
I'm like, okay, they
That's
all
how
know I'm
popular
in
you
Bible
are,
study,
Angel.
but they're still calling me. My granddaughter also called me, and she's only 1.5.
Right.
So
Cool beans. Cool beans.
sorry, you guys.
That's all right.
I would shut it off, but then if he has a seizure,
No,
he can't. call
don't
me,
shut off your
so
phone,
I can't
please.
shut it
It's
off.
quite all right.
I have it all the way turned down, but it vibrates. Anyways,
So this is how they wind up in Egypt. And there's so many stories that come out of this. All right. Well, first of all, we learn about Joseph, and we get to see what kind of a man he is. And I told you, after all the bad guys we've been through so far, even the good guys who act badly, not in Joseph's case. Now, we can tease Joseph about some things, like, well, he might have been a little, snotty-nosed brat of a brother, okay? And we can get into that. But he is a prefigure of Jesus Christ. All right, we talk a lot about that because of the fact that he's a man of great integrity. He will not lie. He will not take the easy way out of things. And as a result, he keeps getting into trouble. But God has his hand on him and takes very, very good care of him and is faithful to him. Again, the God of promise. All right, so without further ado, you ready to read chapter 37?
yeah.
Okay. In verse 1. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. Oy vey kavah. Right? Every time we read that, we know there's trouble coming. And he made, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made a richly ornamented robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." That's what the dun 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 dun. His brother said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told his brothers, "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When Joseph told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Verse 12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" Joseph replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him to one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the desert, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the richly ornamented robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into his cistern. Now the cistern was empty, that there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices and balm and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't here. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornamented robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." Jacob recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "in the morning I will go down to the grave, to my son." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of the Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Oh, wow. Okay? All right. So before we start rolling into this, we need to remember who these sons of Jacob are. And look, they're back in Shechem. You remember Shechem? What happened to Shechem?
They were when they left, right? They run from
Didn't Jacob's sons do something in Shechem? This goes back to Dinah.
Oh, yeah, they slaughtered.
They slaughtered them. There is nobody in Shechem anymore. All right, they're very, very whoever remained afterwards, but the sons of Jacob slaughtered them because of Dinah and because of what Shechem himself had done to her. And I told you then, remember this, that these guys, the idea of killing their brother is nothing to them, nothing at all. That they would slaughter anybody, for that matter. Very sad. Very sad.
Yeah,
All
they
right.
didn't really even have a heart because they threw them in the well and then they went and ate. It says they went and sat down and ate.
Right. Reuben, when we get to it, Reuben thinks they killed him.
Yeah.
Because Reuben wasn't there when they, when they sold him away. He comes back and he's gone. They're going, oh my goodness, you killed him. So let's go back. This is now, we're going to go back to verse 2. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah, the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. So in other words, what is he doing?
Lying.
He's snitching. He's snitching. He's snitching on his brothers.
squealing on them.
He's squealing on them. It's the old saying, right? Snitches get stitches and live in ditches. All right? And so he's snitching on them. And again, wait a minute. I don't have anything wrong with reporting things bad. But again, as Christ will show us, the first thing you're supposed to do, if you see people doing bad things, especially to you, all right, the first thing you do is you go to them and try to make peace with them. And then if they won't listen to you, you bring one or two witnesses. All right? It's ironic to say this because I had somebody yesterday call me, and I spoke to her today, who did something very terrible to me. She's not admitting it, but she's apologizing. This has been over a year. And because of the work I do with them, I was really trying to help her and her organization. And when I began to realize that she really was really struggling with doing things right, I begged off and walked away. And boy, did she lay into me. And she notified people, and people called her. And I didn't say a word. I just, like a sheep being led before the shearer, I just stayed silent. And it's been over a year. And she's really, of the other people that have been doing these things to me, she's the third one now that's apologized. Yeah. I just follow what Jesus says. When I have a beef with somebody, all right, I go to them. Because Jesus said, we want you to be in unity. All right? If you can't win your brother, then you bring one or two witnesses. They still won't listen. You bring them for the whole church and talk to them. Okay? So, but that's hard. That's really, really hard. There's very few people actually read this thing and follow it. We say we do, but it's a whole different thing altogether. So here, Joseph doesn't go to his brothers. Now, mind you, he doesn't have Christ's teaching. Okay? But frankly speaking, he's snitching. Now, to be fair also, he might know what his brothers are capable of. And it was better to tell his father than his brothers, but again,
he's only 17, too.
He is only 17. That's an important point, too. But I'm sorry. I get brothers. We don't get along. I wouldn't turn them over to my father. No, sorry. Just wouldn't do it. Yeah, I just wouldn't. But anyways, that's me. This is him.
No, my sons never squealed on each other.
No, we stuck together like glue.
Not to their father.
No, definitely not to my
They might
father.
tell me, but not to their father.
Yep.
Yeah, my sons would never tell on one another.
See, everybody can relate to this, huh? Yeah? By the way, before I forget, happy Mother's Day, because I'm not going to see you Sunday. All right? Happy Mother's Day. But that is real interesting. And by the way, do we raise our sons and daughters, for that matter, too? Don't we raise them to stick together?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, we see it on Facebook. We see the posts. Yeah. I can say and do to my siblings anything I want. You touch them, you have a really bad enemy. Yeah. And I think that's really good. It's really, really good. Joseph ain't one of those guys. Joseph ain't one of those guys. All right. Verse 3. This is what we talked about already. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made him a richly ornated robe for him. Theologians believe there's another reason why Israel really, really loves Joseph. It has everything to do with his mother. Who was his mom?
Joseph's mother?
Yeah.
Not Mary.
It wasn't Rachel, was it?
It was Rachel. It was Rachel. And the reason why that's important is because that's the one he loved. He works 14 years for her.
Yeah.
All right?
That's right.
He's had a hard time having children by Rachel. That's the reason why Bilhah and Zilpah come into the story. All right? And so all of a sudden when Rachel's finally pregnant,
In her old age.
she has
Very old age.
she has Joseph.
There's also
She has Joseph, right? And remember later on she has Benjamin and she dies.
Yeah.
Okay? So those are, in my opinion, are the two favorite sons. They're the last of these folks. And so that's another reason why possibly Israel loves Joseph more than the others. Okay? But it's still wrong. All right? This is, again, we're going back to his father. Okay? His father's Isaac. Remember, Isaac had two sons.
Yep.
Jacob and Esau. Jacob, now Israel, is one of them. Which one did Isaac like better? Yeah. Do you remember why? It's going to come into the story here in a minute. Okay. How do you get to a man's heart? Through his. Look at this. These are universal truths. Okay. And Esau used to be a game hunter, and he'd bring fresh meat to his father. Joseph liked to hang around the tents. He wasn't. I'm sorry, Joseph. Sorry, Jacob liked to hang around the tents. He wasn't a hunter. He wasn't a man's man. You know what I mean? And so Esau was his favorite.
But his father, good food.
Yes.
His father knew his food.
Yep.
He knew when he was dying, he knew it was the food that he made.
And my father had 5 sons. There's no way my father had a favorite. Not even remotely possible. No. He was too busy. He was too busy criticizing all of us. All right, and then he had one daughter. So that's the favorite.
Yeah, I was just going to say
That's the favorite. And who can blame him? Who can blame him? But there are other issues. A very dysfunctional family. But you can see this. But again, you have to go out of your way to make sure you don't have a favorite. Of my 3 children, they all believe my middle daughter, Anna, is my favorite. Yeah, she doesn't. You don't get mad at her and you don't punish her like you punish us. The kid doesn't get into trouble.
Yeah.
She doesn't know how to get into trouble. She's a fundamental, compliant middle child.
Yep, that's the way my youngest son was like that, Joshua.
Right.
He was like that. He was always afraid of disappointing us.
Yeah,
So
and
he
I'm one
would
thing
go
children
to
fair.
the extreme to not do anything wrong.
Right.
Now he's the he's my rebellious one now. But my kids used to always think, you love him more. He never gets punished.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you want us to punish him for nothing? He
Yeah.
hasn't done anything.
Sorry.
All you got to do is raise your voice to Josh,
Yeah.
and he was in tears. Crumbled
Yep.
he just crumbled.
Right.
And where my other kids, you take things away, punish them, whatever, and they didn't affect them at all. So they always felt like, their dad loved Josh more.
Right.
Just because they didn't see the punishment.
So even though we may be focused on being fair and even,
Yeah.
the children still see it that way.
Yeah.
They still pick up on it and everything.
Yep.
We used to tease my brother Brian about being the favorite just because he was so young.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, not the case. And he was, by the way, my mother's favorite. Which we loved. No, don't get me wrong. We really admired the fact that my mother and my baby brother had such a great relationship. Their birthdays are right next to each other, October 3rd and 4th. So their birthday was always together. I remember I went our way to the Navy. My brother Matthew went to the Air Force. There really weren't that many of us around anyway, so it was really a beautiful thing. And my mother treated us all wonderfully, or terribly. She was both perfectly well balanced, but we teased Brian about being her favorite. But it was all very positive in that sense. But here again, remember, we're talking thousands and thousands of years ago.
Same thing.
Same thing?
Same thing.
Same thing. And that's a warning. Don't do this. With your children, try your very best not to come across having favorites. And Israel does the exact opposite here. Again, following in his father's footsteps, he is no different. Again, the old saying about the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. All right.
Well, what happens if you have a child that's born and the father don't want it?
Yeah.
And you've got to be father and mother.
Yep.
So you get close and you kind of neglect the older one.
Which is my brother's story.
And the youngest one is jealous of the older one.
Yep.
And it's hard because I'm trying to tell them I love both of them.
Yep.
I never tried to teach to go, but the youngest one was still the closest because the father never wanted it from the time I conceived him.
Right. And it's so sad. And it's
It
so
is
sad. So even though we try our best, sometimes it still happens that way. See, my baby brother, when my dad left when I was 13, Brian's 6 years my younger. Okay, so he's like 7 when my dad's gone. And so he's actually more raised by my brother Freddie, who comes after me. But that's one of the reasons why also I think my mother stepped up a little bit more and allowed that natural relationship between them to grow deeper. Again, no one ever resented Brian for this. We used to tease him about it, but that he was the favorite. So it's sad, and it's a struggle.
And it's hard on the mom because I have that situation with my oldest son. Because Josh, my daughter and my son are to my first marriage, and Josh came to my second marriage. And so Josh was the baby, and he was the one that hardly ever needed to be punished. But my oldest son always got the brunt of everything, so I protected him more. So my kids always felt like he was loved more.
Well, my oldest one noticed that the father didn't want her, and she kept saying, I said, what can I do? You tell me what I can do, and I'll do it. I mean, she was only younger herself, but she couldn't answer me because the father liked cheering away, but then when she reached a certain age, she had nothing to do with her. But she had the love in the beginning, where the other one never had his.
Yep.
Because if we went anywhere, it was, I'll take care of here, you take care of that one.
See, also, our relationship with God is so important because God can teach us these things. I've learned these by being a Christian, how to be a better father, and it's been essential. It's so funny. We all know the story about the prodigal son. So there's a man who's called a wise man, has 2 sons. One of them decides to take his inheritance and go run out and blow it. Yeah. Okay, but that father never ever turns on that son. Actually, is excited and thrilled that he's come back, etc., etc. Wants to have a big party. When that boy's brother gets upset and angry that his father is so happy and celebrating, the father, explains to him, said, no, you were faithful and loyal to me. You're all taken care of. You'll be a part of your full inheritance and everything. But your brother, my son, has returned. Whereas he had lost him. Of course, Jesus is teaching that story to let us know about those who are away from us, from the body, and who move away from God, but return. I'm very grateful again. It's one of the great blessings, obviously, in my life is the fact that I was able to come to Christ and allow Christian men and women to teach me how not to do these things. But it doesn't necessarily guarantee. Because I have a prodigal daughter. I do. We all do. We have prodigals at one time or another. But this is what's really exciting. So these are great things not to do. So here he is. So now we're in verse 3. We've already talked about how Israel already finds him. He gives him, and he makes a richly ornamented robe for Joseph. We always hear it's the coat of many colors, right?
Yes.
It doesn't. The Bible doesn't say that.
No.
No, it doesn't.
No.
But it's okay. It could have been a coat of many colors. Very easily. But it's a coat ornamented. It's beautiful. Some theologians say it was more like a woman's clothes because it was so much more beautiful, more colors and things like that. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. So now Joseph is alienated. It gets worse. The old saying about when you're in a hole, stop digging. All right. And again, I'd have to have a conversation with a number of theologians to find out if what I'm about to say is true. There's nothing wrong with having the dream. The issue is telling people.
Yeah. Yeah, he should not have, because that's gloating.
That's where I'm going with this.
I don't think he meant to be prideful. I think
Right.
he was probably excited
Yeah,
that
he's
God
17.
came to him in a
17
dream.
had this wonderful dream.
He was
Yeah.
excited.
Right.
And I don't even know if he even knew what that dream meant.
Right.
He just wanted to share it. But,
Right. Well,
but it came off to his brothers who already had
that's a good theory.
towards him.
That's a good theory. He's sharing it. They say, "Oh, what are you saying? We're going to bow down to you."
Yeah.
At that point, he doesn't explain the second time. Which we'll get into that, because then the second time he still tells them,
Yeah.
and this time it includes his parents. All right. So, anyways, so Joseph had a dream. This is verse 5. And when he told this to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose up and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told his brothers, "Listen," he said, "I had another dream. And this time the sun and moon," that would be his parents, "and 11 stars," those were his brothers, including Benjamin, "were bowing down to me." Verse 10, when he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. This is a prophecy. The answer to the question, "Will you reign over us?" is true. Yes. The answer is yes. You are going to be reigned over, because by the time this all works its way through, Joseph is the number 2 guy in Egypt.
Yeah, but Joseph wasn't telling him. He told him what he dreamt.
Right. Joseph told them what he dreamt.
And they told him their opinion of his dream, and the father did the same thing.
Right. So after the first time they
And
said,
then it came true.
after the first time they're telling him, he definitely knows the dream is, "I'm going to rule over
He
you."
knows, but the brothers come up with the same answer.
Right.
He
So
didn't say that means I'm going to rule over you.
after the
But
first,
that's what they said it.
and then so he knows their opinion. This is no longer a surprise to Joseph.
No, not to Joseph.
But he doesn't carry this thing through, all right? Because we don't hear much about him having this kind of self-image while he's down in a prison in Egypt.
I think too, though, in these days, dreams are important.
Mm-hmm.
Dreams are. It's not like now. If I said, "Oh, I had a dream last night that I was eating soup and blah blah blah," and you guys would be like, "Oh my goodness, who cares?" You know. But back then, dreams were important. They were from God.
We can do a whole study on dreams, right?
Yeah.
We can talk about Daniel.
But I just think that's why they were so.
Oh, no,
upset about
absolutely.
this dream,
You are
because
right.
They believed that this was he was telling them something.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. And remember, the dreams are all over the place. Joseph's dreams about going to Egypt, isn't that funny? Joseph, Jesus' stepdad, has a dream to go down to Egypt to protect him from getting killed. So dreams are very, very important and used here. So they're taking this very seriously. The only question
Who was
is
it that had the dreams that told the king?
Daniel.
Daniel.
Yeah. And saved him.
The king.
Okay, well, Joseph's dreams saved Pharaoh. The idea about, right? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So dreams were really important. To
Very
them.
important. Yeah. In fact, Joseph is also the dream interpreter. All right. So now let's go on down. So we're in verse 12. Now Joseph's brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. That's that city where they had wiped out everybody. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers were grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. So when Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they're grazing the flocks?" "They have moved out from here." The man answered, "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So they're going further away now, further away from Israel than they were originally. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. I mean, I don't care. What has this kid done so far? Really, what has he done?
Nothing.
Nothing. He's irritated him. He's told on them, all right?
Yeah.
He blew the whistle on them. He's telling them these stories about these dreams where they're going to rule over him. Doesn't mean the same thing as, all right? What else has he done? His father loves him more than the rest of them. Wah. Wah. Get over it, okay? Not these guys. Not these guys.
Also, his father sent him to look for them. I mean, I have a different version, but it says he was concerned for them. They had been
Yeah.
gone a while.
Yep, very
so
possible.
he sent Joseph to go and find them.
Right.
He wanted to know where they were. So Joseph was concerned for them
And they had
so-
moved, too. They were not in the usual place that they were
Yeah.
supposed to be or were normally at and stuff like
So
that,
he
too.
was doing a good thing. He was looking after his brothers.
And he wasn't just sending a servant. He wasn't sending somebody else. He was sending his son, his
Yep.
favorite son,
Yep.
and to go look for them. All right. So now we look at it. So Joseph went after verse 19. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. There it is. Okay? They're going to go ahead and they're going to take things into their own hands and they're going to put this whole dream thing to rest. Okay? Big mistake. All right. Remember, Reuben is the oldest son. Right? Reuben, a couple of chapters ago, also did some bad things. And so, Reuben's a trouble person. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the desert, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. At least Reuben has some care, for his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the richly ornamented robe he was wearing. And they took him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. So it just shows you how big the sucker is. It's how they hold on to the water. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices. Watch this. 3 things, right? Spices, balm, and myrrh. We 3 kings of Orient. All right. And they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah. Now, Judah's really becoming the lead brother here. He seems to be the strongest one. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? What will we gain?
Nothing.
Yeah, in other words, he's thinking, what? We can make some money here. Gosh, this is crazy. Okay, well, it's better than killing his brother. All right. Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. Oy. So when the Ishmaelites are also called Midianites, merchants came by. His brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites. How many pieces of silver was Christ sold for?
20.
20, something like that. Yeah.
I thought it was 20.
Yeah, sounds right to me. Okay. Da-da-da-da.
30 pieces.
Yeah, it's 30 pieces.
Yeah,
It's
that
30
was
pieces.
30, yeah.
Yep.
30 pieces, yeah.
Yeah, isn't this interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah, some things just never change. All right. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. Very traditional Jewish mitzvah. When there's a death, they tear their clothes to show how sad it is that something bad has happened. Sitting in sackcloth and ashes is very biblical. You see it a lot of times also as a part of mourning. So here it is. So Reuben tears his clothes because now he's really concerned about his father and what they're going to say to him. He went back to his brothers and said, the boy isn't there. Where can I turn now? Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. All right, let's stop for a second. If you remember the story of Jacob and Esau and the stealing of Esau's birthright, remember Jacob was normally skinned. Esau was very hairy. Isaac is losing his sight. He's actually remembering his people by touch. Very common for blind people is that you learn by braille and other ways you touch things to find out who people are. What did Jacob do to make it look as though
Killed the goat.
he killed a goat?
Yeah.
Fear on us.
Took the fur on his arm. So once again, a goat dies. All right, so they can cover up sin. All right. Then they took they took the ornamented robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe, not our brother's robe." You know, Israel recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." And Jacob tore his clothes, there it is again, put on sackcloth, right, very uncomfortable clothes, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "in mourning will I go down to the grave, to my son." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. That's the commander-in-chief of the military. All right, so that's pretty high up. And that's who he gets sold into. So you want to go back to Egypt. And that's how, the beginning of how the children of Israel, the Hebrew children, will find themselves in Egypt. He's the first one.
So Reuben wasn't part of the selling.
No, he wasn't white. He thought they'd killed him.
Yeah.
Or done something with him.
Right, but then he was part of the making up the story for the father.
He's part of the cover-up. He's sticking with his brothers.
So didn't his brothers sell him when they sold him, or they mustn't have took him?
The brothers sold him, right?
No, they sold him, but after Reuben rips his clothes,
Right,
thinking his brother's dead, he had to go to the other brothers and
Right.
say what happened.
right. And then they come up with a story about what they're
Okay,
going to do
but
with
they
his
didn't tell Reuben that they had sold him off.
Well, when Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe. They never say to him that they sold him. You're right. So Reuben may not know at this point what's going on.
But they're making up a story.
They're making up a story about what happened.
Reuben is the youngest, though, isn't
Reuben's the oldest.
he? He's the oldest.
Benjamin is the youngest.
Benjamin is
Yep.
the youngest.
Benjamin's the youngest. Probably 12, 13 at this time. Very young, and probably not even with his brothers at this point. Very, very scary. So you're 17. You're now a slave in Egypt. You've been set apart from your family. To your knowledge, you'll never see your mother's already passed, and you may never see your father again. And then you will maybe not even see. When we get further on, if you remember the story, Joseph really, really yearns to see his younger brother Benjamin. He asks specifically about him when he gets to talking to his brothers, when the whole trickery thing starts to happen. And because, again, they're full brothers. They both have the same parents. And so it's really interesting to see these kind of things.
Because Joseph gives them a party. But they
He
don't
sure does.
realize it's their
It's a
brother.
great story, huh? It sounds like it's right out of Hollywood, doesn't it? What he does to get back at him. And because, again, he's struggling with himself. What do I do about this? Because he wants to punish them. But he just can't seem to. The worst thing they do to him is he keeps Benjamin and then sends for his father. And so these same brothers have to go back to his father, having already sold his brother Joseph into this, and now they've left Benjamin down there in Egypt. So we'll get to that, and you'll see. All right, because we see the development of the brothers.
Yeah.
The brothers change. Praise God. But and then of course, we know the story of Joseph and how that goes. But it's pretty powerful. Other questions? Yeah, very famous story. Obviously, they've done. There was the whole musical.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole musical and everything along those lines. We read about Judah in the next chapter. Please feel free to read it. Again, Judah and his issues. We got Reuben and his issues. And the irony is that these are very famous names today.
Yeah.
I mean, the term Jew comes from Judah. All right? Ben-Hur, right? It's Judah Ben-Hur.
Yeah.
Okay? Went out with my friend Bill Cody to play golf and went for lunch afterwards. He had a Reuben sandwich.
Oh, I love them.
We all do. All right, it's a Reuben sandwich in Hebrew. We say Reuben. And these are famous names, and these are not exactly great guys. All right, this is Levi. The Levi. There's a book You have Levi. They're the priests. God makes them out to be the priests for Israel. In fact, that's one of the big problems in Jesus' time is that the Levitical priesthood is over. It's become very political. They're selling it. And that's where Caiaphas he's not a Levite, and yet he's the chief priest in Jerusalem at the time of Christ. And it's because they screwed it all up and everything. So it's interesting. These names are, Dan and Naphtali. Naphtali, no. Dan, yeah. But
A lot of odd names, but they're all important names.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the ones that many of these names we're very familiar with.
Yeah.
And the Bible, again, picks up where these things fall apart. But it's very, very interesting. So definitely questions and comments. Okay.
It's very clear.
This is very clear. This is very
Not
clear.
everywhere, but this is very clear chapter.
Yeah, it's going to be fairly easy for the rest of Genesis. Lots of fun, lots of dreams, like Mike said, lots of dreams, but
Dreams are supposed to be very important because every dream has a meaning to it.
right in this case it is. These dreams were being interpreted,
Yes.
and it's like Angel was saying, throughout the whole Bible.
Yeah.
There are times God uses dreams. He did it with Jacob too, in the stairway to heaven.
I never dream.
You don't.
Never.
My wife
I
doesn't
can't
either.
remember.
Right.
Either I dream and I
Yeah.
can.
My wife can't remember any of her dreams.
No.
I remember them. I remember them detail,
Don't remember
and
any dreams.
yep.
I wish I did.
Yeah. No, I remember my dreams.
No, I just never remember if I dreamed because I don't remember anything.
Yeah.
Mine ain't good.
Years ago, they used to ask, do you dream in black and white or technicolor?
Yeah.
Well, to me, I dream in colors. I don't know.
So the idea is to try to understand the subconscious.
Yeah.
And everything.
Yeah.
See, I dream in color.
Yeah.
But but for the most part, women, they're very weird. I had
See,
the weirdest dream.
I don't dream either, but my communication with the Lord comes in real life. And just recently, the 3 experiences I'll share with you is when I played music Saturday night, there was 4 people who came in. They were older couple. It must have been and his son, but they were another older couple. And so I'm sitting there with my shirt, and I was waiting for the meal. And he comes over and he says, Jesus. And I said,
Jesus. See?
I said, it's the name above all names.
Jesus. Spanish for Jesus.
The Spanish,
Right.
I was going to say.
I said, the name above all names. He looked at me and says, what about Buddha? I said, the name above all names.
Right.
And he turned and he says, well, what about Muhammad? I said, the name above all names. So he was heading towards the door to leave, and I didn't have a chance to say, don't worry, on the last day, we're going to see Buddha and Muhammad kneeling before that. So that was just one. And then I was at fishing 2 days ago, and there was a sparrowhawk. It shows up when I fish. It's one of my signs from the Lord that he's present. And the sparrowhawk was eating something up on one of the beams underneath the bridge. And then they take off and they fly. Maybe they go out. He goes up to the big electric tower there and sits and sings. I don't know if it's the female calling the male or just the male calling the female. And then she comes back, or he, and she flies under the bridge. Well, in the meantime, she's gone. A seagull comes up and steals what she was eating and takes it down into the water. I'm telling you right now, you've never seen a sparrowhawk. She dove at that seagull. She missed him the first time.
Right.
Seagull jumped up out of the water and moved over. She went at him again. Moved over. Went at him again. Took 5 times. On the 5th time, the seagull dropped what he was eating, and she got it back, or he got it back. And the Lord told me, see, I will never leave you, and the world will never take you out of my hands. And that's the truth. The other is perseverance. I was fishing yesterday morning, and I looked over to the left, and there's a deer swimming the Sakana River.
Wow.
She got in,
Yeah,
it's a
sure.
doe. She got in off the beach, coming out. She's just like going like this, and I'm looking, going, she's going to turn around.
Yeah.
She kept going. She got out in the middle where the currents were, and grabbed the current, grabbed her, and started taking. Seagulls would dive bombing her.
Right.
She just kept on going. She got all the way across the Sakana River, up out of the water, shook herself, and went on. I never saw that in my life.
Oh,
They say
wow.
at Prudence Island, that's how the deers travel. But I'd never seen one swim. I mean, they say that coat is, the hairs are hollow, so it gives them buoyancy.
Right.
I don't know. And and then the Lord said, there's perseverance. And it's true. That took great perseverance. So look at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Against the current and
Against the
everything,
current,
yeah,
right
with the
straight
seagull
across.
coming at them and
Yeah.
everything.
So
Wow. Wow.
this is how I learn of what He tells me. So
Cool.
it's the best way. We see it out when we walk the street.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we talk about how, if you look for God, you find Him.
He always lets you find Him.
Yeah.
Never hides Himself from the one that's seeking Him.
Yeah.
Never does.
All right, we're going to sign off, and we'll see you guys next week.